Advent here with Billboard Dance. We have a very special guest here today, French electronic music pioneer Jean-Michel Jarre.
Hi.
It's great to have you.
Yeah, very exciting to be here in at Billboard, but also during this North American show. I mean, a tour. I started a few days ago in Toronto and yesterday night in Montreal, just in New York for a day before going back to Montreal and then going to Boston and Philly and New York in a week time at the Radio City. I'm very excited.
You've had a storied career, broken Guinness, world records for performances, but this is actually your first U.S. tour, correct?
Yeah, I did. I worked a lot in the U.S. I did some concerts. I did still. I'm still in the Guinness Book for the biggest audience in America with the Houston concert for NASA quite a while ago. But it's actually my first proper North American tour, and I'm really happy to share with the US audience this specific project for different reasons, because it's a mixture of the live performance of the tracks and the songs I've done in this Electronica project we talked about last time we met together, Matt, and with this idea that working with different people from the different generations from the electronic music scene is something that I wanted to put on stage. Also, the opportunity to revisit, to rework some of my classics with the sound of 2017. I mean, the sounds has evolved so much the past 10, 15 years. We are listening music with much more bass and probably a less high mid. And all these kind of things. So I wanted to rework technically and artistically some of my classics to create a kind of soundtrack for the film that people could have in their mind during the performance. And for this, I conceived a very special also stage design, kind of 3D without glasses. And truly, frankly, I think it has to be seen to be believed. It's what lots of people who have been even yesterday in Montreal or in Toronto were telling us, saying it's whatever you see on YouTube, on the computer. I mean, it doesn't give justice to the live experience.
You've been, a trailblazer in terms of live electronic music performance, especially on like a large scale concert. What sort of new technology has, for this time around, has kind of allowed you to do new things up there?
Actually, lots of new things are involved. First of all, in terms of sound, we are using a very special kind of processing to create a kind of very immersive sound, a kind of surround sound. It's coming from the mix, but it's also coming from the way the whole mix is processed with kind of mastering processing also at the output of the front of house and desk and for the PA systems, and also obviously visually. What I'm presenting for during this North American tour this time is probably something that I couldn't have achieved even 5 years ago, because the technology was not there. And this kind of, I must say that I hate 3D with glasses. I think it gives me headache, and I'm ready to pay even more to watch a movie in 2D rather than 3D, because I think the real 3D should be without glasses. It's what I tried to conceive with this project, having this kind of feeling of depth and creating layers and a kind of feeling of immersion, and really 3D without glasses. And I think I was a bit scared that it couldn't work, but with the technology we have, I mean by this, the very special software we use to create these 3D images on different layers of screens works really, really well. And and I'm so pleased that about the reviews and the way the audience is welcoming this project so far in Europe and at the beginning of the North American tour already in Toronto and Montreal.
As I mentioned, you've played to millions and millions of people. You've said, I believe you broke your own Guinness Book world record and played to 3.5 million in Moscow. When you're playing these sort of like city scale massive concerts, what does it feel like being up there? Does it even feel real? Can you even kind of interact with the audience, or how does that feel? I've always wondered.
Actually, you know, Matt, I think it's I feel more and more that the music performance is probably a kind of mysterious chemistry between two entities, the performers and what's going on stage, and the audience. And after a while, whatever the scale of the audience is, it's not what matters. What matters is the vibes you feel as a performer from the audience, and probably also what the vibe is created and conveyed from the performance from the stage to the audience. And which is interesting with this Electronica World Tour is actually I conceived this project for being really modular. I mean, I can play this gig in a club or in a big outdoor situation. It was the case actually 3 weeks ago. We were by the Dead Sea in Israel for a huge outdoor venue in the middle of the desert with that production. I played some big arenas such as the O2 in London, for instance, but also so some theater, even some clubs. I mean, this is the beauty of this project, is you can really expand it or reducing it in function of the venue. And I really love this quite unique situation.
And I know you also recently released, the third part in the trilogy for Oxygen, which, was such a seminal album for electronic music. Was that a daunting task to go in, I believe, 20 years later to tackle, a sequel like that?
You know, when I did the first Oxygen, it was a generic title, almost like a book with part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, the different tracks had no specific titles. And while I was doing it, I said it's strange because I have the feeling to write like a kind of novel, and it could be cool in the future to create sequels of this first album. And I've always been very interested by the idea of sequels in literature, in movies. It doesn't really exist in music. I said it could be cool and fun to do that along my life and to release from time to time some sequels. And in a sense, Oxygen 3, the new Oxygen, is Oxygen Season 3, if I can say that. With the idea that you take the same characters, in the case of music, it's maybe the same sound or the same instruments, but with a different scenario, with a different script. And I use this when I did the first Oxygen. I did it in the Vinyl Days in 6 weeks with limited equipment, and I did the same for the new one. That I locked myself up in for 6 weeks in studio with rather limited equipment, and probably also going back to what Oxygen is. I mean, Oxygen is the visual, the music is this mixture of sunny and dark aspects, and Oxygen 3 probably has a side 1 being quite dark and abstract, and side 2 more sunny and more melodic.
I know that the visual aspect of performance and art has always been really important for you. I know you've soundtracked films, and what I was curious was during your creative process when you're composing this music, is there a visual there as well throughout that process, or is that something that kind of comes later?
It's a very interesting point because I asked this question to myself quite a while. I mean, for quite often. I mean, I have some. I start lots of time, very often, with some visual images or visual, but they are very rarely the visual I'm using in a performance. I don't know why, and I always thought that electronic music was and is quite close to abstract painting. I mean, to the Jackson Pollock or eventually to Basquiat, but not more in terms of figurative expression. It's more like kind of abstract shapes and graphics And I like to think that what I'm doing in performance it can be the soundtrack and the visual track of the story that people can create by sharing the concert during that night. It's the reason why I like also to think that every concert should be slightly different, to inject lots of live elements in the electronic music performance, where I think I'm convinced that this is the future of electronic music. I mean, EDM is fading out a little bit because of the fact that after a while, if you start listening to music, you cannot go on forever just with a USB key or an SD card, and where actually at one stage the presence of the musician on stage is irrelevant, and then you don't need the guy on stage. You just if somebody is on stage, it's actually because you have somehow also not only a visual expectation, but also to create a link between what you hear and what you see on a musical point of view, what's happening on stage. And we can see that a lot more and more DJs now are asking themselves this question, to how to get rid of this kind of rather frustrating situation, which is just having a USB key and just clapping your hands for 2 hours. It's not a critique, because I think any kind of for me, any kind of expression has its value, and I love EDM festivals. But I think that on a musical point of view, I think it's what I try to do in my gigs, where we are 3 musicians surrounded by 50 different instruments, but also to try to make people understand and feel how what they hear and they listen to is made. So I have lots of built-in cameras. I have some cameras on my micro camera and my glasses, so people can see what I'm doing in my kitchen.
You know, the first time that we talked, you said something that really stuck with me, and I've repeated it before. You said that it's funny, you know, people think that electronic music is a genre when it's really just a new way of composing music. I'd love for you to, you know, kind of unpack that a little bit, and for those who haven't, you know, kind of heard your perspective, sort of explain that.
Yes, actually, I mean, electronic music today, it has no boundaries anymore. It's everywhere, and it's actually because of what you just we're just referring to, is this idea that electronic music is not like hip hop or punk or rock. It's a different approach of making music. Before electronic music, we were doing music with notes based on solfeggio. Now you can still do music with notes based on solfeggio, but actually you can take a microphone, going out there, I mean, recording the sound of a conversation, of a street, of engines or whatever, and doing music with it. We as musicians, we are becoming sound designers also, and not only just musicians dealing with harmonies and the traditional musical law, in a sense, and or rules. And it's something that attract me a lot, coming from having classical background, having played in a lot of rock bands. Suddenly I was able to be, and I'm able to be, my own craftsman, and playing and creating my own palette of sounds for that project, this or that project. And this is something which makes electronic music so special and beyond any kind of genres. Actually, inside electronic music, under the umbrella of electronic music, you have lots of different sub-genres.
You know, one thing I've always kind of appreciated about your perspective is, I mean, you know, having come, you know, before and sort of paving the way for so many of the artists that are now, you know, making music and you know, kind of reaching a wide audience. I think it'd be easy for you to sort of, you know, have like an old school approach, or, you know, kind of be critical of them, but you've really embraced like a new generation of producers and artists. A good example would be the Electronica project, where you collaborated with, you know, legends like, you know, Pete Townsend, but also contemporary producers as well. Would love to hear just sort of where you know, what, you know, where you feel the electronic music scene contemporary is going, and which artists you feel are kind of pushing it forward?
It's a very interesting point, because I've always been intrigued by lots of artists, some colleagues of my generations, younger or older. I mean, unconsciously exploring or exploiting 5 years or 10 years before and after their peak. Because in your career, in the career of any artist, you have a peak, which is most of the time the first success, if you have one, the first success you have. And you have your Sgt. Pepper, or your Dark Side of the Moon, or your Ziggy Stardust, and that is like tattooed on your skin as an artist. And I think that for me, the life of an artist, my life, is about experimenting and about kind of pursuing this kind of in a rather obsessive way, as we talked last time when we were together, discussing together about this idea of almost like a mirage, like a soap, trying to get one day the ideal piece of music, and then you continue and I continue to experiment, to be like a sponge, to steal, to be inspired by everything around. And obviously these days in the world of electronic music, you have so many interesting people. I mean, I remember for electronica, the first time I heard a band such as Fuck Buttons, the British band. And at the moment of where lots of people are saying, yes, but now you have so many people doing so many electronic music. I mean, you have nothing new anymore, and which is not true. The first time I heard Fuck Buttons, I mean, it was something totally different. I never heard that before. The same as the first time I heard Skrillex or Deadmau5. They have an instant recognizable sound as like Miles Davis or John Coltrane or the Beach Boys or the Beatles. It's the same thing. And I think that what I try to express also through the Electronica project is working with people who are a massive source of inspiration to me. From, as you said, from Gesa Feldstein, Air, to Massive Attack, or Moby, or Laurie Anderson, or John Carpenter even. And they all have in common something very special. They have an instant recognizable sound. You listen to 30 seconds of Moby, or 30 seconds of the Pet Shop Boys, or Gary Newman, or Tangerine Dream, or Massive Attack. You know it's them and nobody else. And it has been a kind of initiation journey for me to work and sharing the creative process like we are now. I mean, physically in the same place. And to learn a lot from the way they are approaching my job. And I'm approaching my music in a specific way, like everybody else is doing. And that is a very interesting way to think that electronic music, as we were saying last time, as a legacy, as a family, and as a future. This is really what makes me feeling really in phase today, probably more than when I started. When I started, we just a bunch of crazy kids. I mean, being victims of the kind of contemptuous attitude towards the establishment of classical music, or even the establishment of rock. I mean, it's strange to see that generation after generation, you have this, for some of them, you have this kind of reactionary, dogmatic view of what is new. I mean, the beginning of jazz, I mean, people from the classical world said jazz is not music. And then the beginning of rock, jazzmen said rock is not music. And the beginning of electronic music, the people from the rock scene said this is not music. It's done with these kind of strange machines with knobs. It's not a musical instrument. So on and so forth. It's the reason why, like, today you have people doing music performance, as we said, with an USB and a USB key or SD card. This is another form or another way to express music. My point before was to say, I think that in a live performance, as long as you're not here just for dancing and having fun, but listening to music, I think you need to create a visual link, not only with the music you're playing around you, like I've been one of the first time to do, but to create the visual link between what you hear and the source of the instruments. You know, when somebody is playing a trombone or violin, culturally you know that when you see the shape of violin, you know what sound is coming from this instrument, because for centuries, generation after generation, it's in our DNA, it's in our blood. When you listen to lots of electronic sounds, it's very difficult to understand how it is done. But I think it's the next step. It's very important that the electronic music scene now is asking themselves the question of how to communicate this, because then the feeling will be even more, deeper and probably even more satisfying for both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that's really interesting and also challenging about electronic music is that, compared to, say, rock or others, the way in which it's composed isn't always readily apparent by the way in which it's performed, especially when it's DJs, kind of playing these recordings, and that makes it easy for critics to write it off. And that's why I think it's really interesting that, as you said in your current, performance and your tour, you have the cameras kind of, showing people on stage what's being done. How important do you feel that is? And also, I would be curious to know if you feel like there's been sort of a growing awareness, or are people's minds changing about electronic music? Are people starting to be more accepting to live electronic artists?
I think it's, being on stage and performing is all about putting yourself in danger, and this idea of the moment where you lose control. It's where you really connect with people. And when you are behind your turntable and just basically playing play, you're in a kind of comfort zone that is not linked to the energy you transmit to the audience. I think the energy has... Okay, for a while it has to come just from the bass, the beat, and the kick, and the bass drum. But after a while, people want more, and I think it's very important for the future of electronic music to explore, to push boundaries, and to, as you said, now there is a need more and more for live electronic music. It's the reason why that I think that truly this tour is the reason why I wanted to play the US with this tour, because it's all about this, all about trying to create the mix between music quite dynamic, upon which at certain moment you can really dance and move your body and all that, but also creating a real link between the music you're producing on stage and the comprehension, the understanding, the emotional understanding of what you're doing and how it is perceived.
Now, one thing I also remember from our first conversation was we had a really, I think at the end we had a really interesting talk about just new technologies, and I think you were telling me about 3D sound, and I would love to hear what are some of the technologies that are currently exciting you, or that you're currently finding inspiring.
Lots of new technology excites me at the moment. VR, virtual reality, is something that I'm really interested by. 3D without glasses, for me, the future of movies and the future also of stage design. And also, I would say artificial intelligence. We have started. There is no possibility of going back. We have to accept and to understand that probably in 1 or 2 generations from now, you'll have machines and robots able to do very good music, very good movies, very good novels. And it's not necessarily bad news, because then we'll have to, so far we've always been able to control technology or to deal with technology, and then our role will change. The 21st century is going to be a massive revolution for the first time when we got a plane and we were able to fly, the first time when we went to the moon. 21st century, amongst other things, will be the century where for the first time we delegate, or the creative process will be done by another entity than our brain. and this going obviously to it's not we should not be scared about the future. It's quite exciting, because then where will be our role? Where we'll be able to how mankind will be able to deal with this new approach of life, and it's quite exciting. So it's not for tomorrow morning, but tomorrow afternoon, I think.
I know you've never shied away from politics and kind of the issues that you believed in. I know you collaborated with Edward Snowden on a song. You've performed concerts for causes and for charities that you believed in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the recent French election, the presidential election, and also just the current kind of global political climate we're in.
I think in one sentence, I think that in France we got it right, and we didn't got extreme right. So this is very good news.
Well said.
The fact that actually also we have fresh blood. I mean, it's great to have president in his late 40s, because late 30s even. It means that there is obviously an immediate this man will, as by nature and by generation, of course, an immediate understanding of the world today. And we've been in France, but it's true in lots of countries, and unfortunately true also in your country. People of, it's not a matter of age, it's a matter of system. And what's happening in the world is actually there is a massive rejection of political system of the 20th century. We need for something else. And actually the French election showed, like Brexit, like here in the States, that people are fed up about the scheme. So they can go extreme. It has been the case in your country. It almost has been the case in France. But fortunately, in France, it has been the same phenomenon of rejection. But we found one guy who is able to not be in the dark side of the force.
I think we'll wrap up my questions with just asking about what else we can expect from you this year. Obviously the tour, but what's sort of on the radar for you going forward?
I really would like to develop some parallel project. I've always been interested by not side project but parallel project. For instance, in terms of recordings, recently I did Electronica, this massive production involving lots of different artists and with some very quite heavy rhythmic track. But at the same time, I released in parallel Oxygen 3, which is, linked to my first music. And I would like to do the same also on stage by having maybe 2 or 3 projects at the same time. This Electronica project is made for arena and also outdoor. I would like to think about a theater project, maybe something different with different kind of music from my repertoire, but also from new music. And also developing this kind of collaboration project. I recently worked with, it was the other side. I've been invited in the Gorillaz album with Damon Albarn for 3 songs, and I really enjoyed it immensely. Damon with Jamie Hewlett, they came to my studio. We spent 3 days together, and we worked on the Gorillaz is based on collaborations, and actually they started their trip in my studio. That was more than 1 year ago. It was really fun, and I really would like to develop this kind of collaboration. It's very exciting, and I think electronic music, in a sense, I don't know if electronic music needs it, but I need it. I think that for a long time, electronic musicians, we've been, as we discussed the first time we met, have been like isolated in a sense, like painters or writers in the atelier. And now it's interesting to do like people in rock and roll or hip hop or jazz doing. By collaborating, and not only through files. I think it's funny because I have the feeling that files this is dated already. we did that 10 years ago. I mean, sending files and all that. And okay, that was for me the dark age of digital era. And now which is great, is you don't need that, because you have the world in your in your pocket through your smartphone. So, I mean, which is fun with in a creative process, is actually to be like this. We could do this. We could do this interview in. I could be in Paris, you in New York, and through FaceTime or WhatsApp or whatever. It's okay, but it's not the same. It doesn't mean that it's better or worse, but it's different. It's different, and of course, for a creative process, it's even more true, and the fact that the result will be necessarily different. And I have quite a lots of collaboration project that I really would like to achieve in the near future, and developing this stage project at the same time, and being more in the country. I think for me, this North American tour is also probably opening the door for more to share with the US audience. And it's kind of almost experimentation for me on stage in this country, just to try to share with just what we talked about, and what the reason why we are talking this afternoon is exactly that. I mean, what does it mean 2017 to play the US with a kind of live environment for electronic music, in which the EDM market is quite strong, but I think it needs something else. It needs a fresh, if not fresh blood, actually fresh ideas, and I would be happy if I can contribute to this.
Real quick before we open up to questions, we'd just love to hear a little bit more about collaborating with the Gorillaz and what that was like, and if there are any interesting stories from those sessions.
I mean, actually, you can go to all our Facebooks, mine or Gorillaz, where you have lots of small videos, quite fun, that Jamie Hewlett, the other side of the visual side of Gorillaz, did, and it says a lot on the way, the freshness. I have a huge admiration for Damon as a musician, as a human being, and he's very creative, and I think it's very refreshing to work with somebody who has done so many things already, but he's still like a teenager, and I feel that we have something close in that aspect, because I've done lots of things, but I still consider myself as a beginner.
Thank you. All right, we're going to open up to fan questions now.
Okay, Rennie from Facebook wants to know, do you prefer hardware-based synthesizers or software-based?
Sorry, I was just trying to get some water, so I missed that one.
Renee wants to know, do you prefer hardware synthesizers or software-based technologies? It's
entirely depending on what I want to achieve. I think there is no hierarchy in music instruments. If you want a violin, use a violin. If you want a plugin, use a plugin. You know, it's entirely depending on. I mean, this is true today. I would say that 10 years ago, I would say definitely the hardware would have my favor. But now, the digital and virtual instruments have made so many progress, not only in terms of sounds, but in terms of concept. Because for a long time, plugins and virtual instruments were just imitating or emulating existing hardwares, even until imitating the look of real hardware. Now you have so many new plugins that able to open doors on absolutely virgin territories, and making sound that in no way you can achieve with hardware. So which is great today, is actually you could choose whatever you want. It's what we have on stage. Actually, we have some hardware, serious hardware, modular synthesizers, until plugins, and even some touch screens, and it's a mixture of hardware and software. It's what our life is made of. But we have a smartphone in our pocket, but we can still be on our bike. You know, this is exactly the same for music.
Okay, and the last one, Greg wants to know, is there still any musicians out there that you would love to collaborate with that you haven't already?
Yeah, a lot more. The trap with projects such as Electronica is actually people are spending their time to ask me why not this, why not that one. So I could spend the rest of the day to name the list of people I would like to work with. But among them, you can have I don't know, in a total random style, like Deadmau5 or Chemical Brothers or Rammstein or Trent Reznor, or lots of people totally different, but also so close to what I love as styles and as musicians.
Guys, thank you so much for coming in. It's a pleasure. Yeah, and you can catch Jean-Michel on tour. You've got your Radio City Music Hall performance in New York. Is it next Saturday?
Next Saturday,
Yeah.
I'm playing Boston. That is in Tuesday. No, Fiona. Boston, Philadelphia. But Boston is on. Anyway, you can find this on my Facebook and everything. But Boston, Philadelphia, and New York next week, and then Chicago, Denver, San Francisco, and Los Angeles for 27th of May, and it will be the end of this world, this first leg.
So don't miss him if he's coming to your city. Thanks so much, Jean-Michel.
Thank you, Matt.